Why is it that you can picture success so vividly? The person you want to become, the life you want to live, the sense of achievement you've replayed in your mind countless times. And yet, when it's time to act, you somehow stay exactly where you are. Why do you wake up telling yourself, today will be different, today I'll finally start, today I'll focus on what truly matters, only to find yourself hours later scrolling, distracted, postponing, quietly moving what matters most to tomorrow again? And why, when night comes, you lie in bed frustrated, disappointed in yourself, fully aware you're capable of more, yet still unable to make yourself move? How long has this cycle lasted? Promising, delaying, regretting, repeating. If any of this feels familiar, then today isn't about accusing you of lacking discipline, and it's not another speech about trying harder. Instead, we're exploring a psychological mechanism that rarely gets explained clearly. Why your mind can crave growth and achievement while simultaneously pulling you back toward comfort and avoidance, and why real change usually doesn't begin when motivation finally appears, but when you understand what has been protecting you and what has been quietly limiting you. You probably know this scene well. It's Monday morning. You open your laptop, ready to finally start that project you've been planning for months. Coffee prepared, to-do list written, you've even imagined the outcome: more freedom, more income, or simply the satisfaction of doing something meaningful for yourself. But just before starting, you tell yourself, I should check a bit more information first. Maybe refine the plan slightly. Just a few minutes to relax. A few minutes becomes 30. 30 becomes an afternoon. And later, lying in bed, it's not that you don't know what to do. Actually, you know exactly what to do. Psychology sometimes refers to this pattern as action avoidance. The more important something feels, the more uncertainty it carries. Risk of failure, risk of judgment, or the possibility it won't match the image you built in your mind. So the brain looks for safer substitutes: planning, researching, imagining, consuming information. All of these create the sensation that progress is happening. But the step that actually changes your life never quite arrives, which means often you don't lack ambition at all. You've simply allowed the feeling of preparing to act to quietly replace action itself. And once that substitution becomes habitual, starting begins to feel harder and harder. After this pattern repeats for a while, you begin turning against yourself. Maybe you tell yourself you're lazy, undisciplined, not built for success. But what's happening inside you isn't that simple. Picture an ordinary evening. You plan to work out after work, or write, or move forward on something meaningful. You get home and think, I'll just rest for 5 minutes. Your phone lights up. A video starts playing. Messages appear. Scrolling feels effortless. An hour passes. It's not that your goals stopped mattering. It's that your brain made a safer choice. From a neurological perspective, your mind follows a basic principle. Reduce discomfort first. Long-term goals carry uncertainty. They involve effort, delayed rewards, and the possibility of failure. Your brain interprets that uncertainty as potential threat. But scrolling, watching, handling small, easy tasks, these activate the dopamine reward system immediately. You feel relief, a small sense of control, a brief emotional lift. Over time, your nervous system learns a pattern, uncomfortable feeling to choose easy stimulation to feel better. And once that loop is reinforced, it becomes automatic. You're not lacking ambition. Your brain is simply doing what it evolved to do: protect you from stress. The problem is that this system optimizes for short-term comfort, not long-term growth. And unless you recognize that, you'll keep mistaking protection for weakness. Once you begin noticing that your brain favors comfort, you try to change. You decide to act. But then something subtler appears: perfectionism. You tell yourself, I'll start once the plan is clearer, when I have more time, when I feel fully prepared. You want to launch a side project, but you keep refining the outline. You want to get fit, but spend weeks researching routines. You want to create something, but endlessly rewrite the beginning. On the surface, this looks responsible. But psychologically, perfectionism is often tied to fear of failure. When the standards in your mind are extremely high, any imperfect start feels risky. So delay becomes rational. There's even a term for this pattern: self-handicapping. As long as you never fully begin, you never have to confront whether your ability matches your ambition. In the short term, this protects your self-image. In the long term, it freezes your life. You don't avoid action because you don't care. You avoid it because you care so much that failure feels threatening. And once you see that clearly, the obstacle looks different. It's not a lack of talent. It's a fear of imperfection disguised as preparation. Once perfectionism loosens its grip, the next step usually isn't finding stronger motivation, it's building momentum. You may have believed for years that motivation comes first, and action follows. But behavioral psychology suggests the opposite is often true. Action generates motivation. Think about a simple moment. You tell yourself you'll work for just 10 minutes. Nothing ambitious, just start. At first, resistance is still there, but once you begin, attention settles. The task feels less overwhelming. Progress becomes tangible. This reflects what psychologists call behavioral activation. When you engage in purposeful action, anxiety tends to decrease while perceived control increases. Completing even small tasks also releases moderate dopamine, reinforcing the action-reward cycle. Gradually, your brain relearns something important. Effort isn't only strain, it can also bring satisfaction. That's why effective change rarely starts with grand plans. It starts with lowering the activation threshold. 15 focused minutes, a short workout, one small step forward. Individually, these actions seem minor, but repeated consistently, they build psychological momentum. And once momentum exists, action depends less on willpower. It begins to resemble habit. Change doesn't arrive dramatically. It accumulates quietly through many imperfect but consistent beginnings. For a long time, you may have assumed laziness was the problem. But looking closer, what held you back was rarely lack of ability. More often it was uncertainty, fear of imperfection, and the brain's instinct to protect you. Procrastination, in many cases, isn't rejection of your future. It's an attempt to avoid discomfort. Yet when that protection persists too long, it becomes its own form of limitation. You start doubting yourself. Motivation feels inconsistent. Progress seems distant. But understanding these mechanisms already shifts something. Not because you suddenly become stronger, but because you stop misinterpreting yourself. You stop labeling hesitation as failure. You stop treating pauses as defects. You allow movement even when it isn't perfect. Sustainable change rarely comes from emotional intensity. It grows from alignment between expectations, capacity, and the pace of real life. And when that alignment begins, life doesn't transform overnight. It simply starts moving, quietly, steadily, forward. Understanding yourself is often the first real step. Once the step exists, direction has already changed. This is Felix. May you understand yourself a little deeper and treat the growing version of you with patience and kindness. See you next time.